Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is SewRena, and in today's video we're going to be using one of my favorite sewing machine attachments. It is my vintage Singer Professional Buttonholer. I use this on my Canmore. It is a universal buttonholer. That's how I'm able to use it on a Canmore brand sewing machine. All you need is a machine that is capable of a zigzag stitch, a vertical shank, and a low shank machine. I cannot use this interchangeably with my high shank Canmore sewing machine. This buttonholer comes with a lot of buttonhole templates, so I have way more options and variety for making buttonholes as compared to the buttonhole attachment that would have come with the Canmore. This is a completely mechanical device. There are no computers, so it does last well and it holds up really well as well. So I'm really looking forward to sharing a full demo on how to attach this attachment to your sewing machine and giving you a little bit more details on how it works. So if you're interested, go ahead and like and subscribe, and let's get into it. This is the packaging that the Professional Buttonholer by Singer comes in. I have the version for a vertical shank machine, and I do so with a low shank Canmore. You can also get a version that has a slant shank, so if you're going to buy this, keep an eye out and make sure you get the right version for your machine, because if you have a slant shank Singer, you can also get that. So I have the instructions. This manual can be downloaded for free online. If you just Google the buttonholer, you should be able to download a free manual if you have the buttonholer without your manual. And here is a little adapter plate. I don't need one for my machine, so I won't be using it. It comes with a screw, and then these are all of the templates for your buttonholers. The green one is the regular worked buttonhole, and this is just the standard buttonhole that you would do with a zigzag stitch. Then you have the dark brown one, which does like the pearl buttonholes or the keyhole looking buttonholes, as well as your eyelets. So if you want to make your own belts, you'd use this brown one. And then last but certainly not least, you have the template for your bound buttonhole, and that's the light tan. On the back of each of the templates, it shows the size of the buttonhole that it creates. It's in millimeters as well as fractions, and it's kind of hard to read here on camera, but they're all there. Now, without further ado, we have the buttonholer itself, and on the far left there's a lock knob for your stitch selector. One will be what you use for your worked buttonholes and your eyelets, and two is for your bound buttonholes. And then you have your space selector on the right, and it goes all the way from a 1 to a 4, and that determines the space, how wide your buttonholes are. Then the little lock on the top opens up the compartment where you will put your templates, and they all attach to that little gear right there. And then you have a lever on the upper right which helps move the buttonholer into its starting position. So once you crank that, it moves that bottom piece around in a circle, just in case you have to do that manually to reset your space. Now I'm going to show you how I attach it to my Canmore. This is a universal buttonholer, so you can put it on Singers as well as other machines. You just have to make sure you have the right shank machine. So I can't put this on my high shank Canmore at all. So first you want to remove your presser foot, lower the feed dogs, or you can use that stitch plate cover that I showed you, that adapter that was in the beginning of the video that I left in the box. Because I can lower my feed dogs, I lower my feed dogs. I don't need that. And now I attach the that little hook to the needle bar, and you'll just have to watch carefully as I slide that in and line the holes up so I can put the screw back on. Make sure that it attaches on two parts of your machine, and that way you know it's in there and it's ready to go. Once all the holes line up, then screw that screw back in, and now it's time to get sewing. I already have a green template in there, which means we're starting off with a worked buttonhole. And now let's fix the settings for sewing. So what I want to do is I want to put it on the tightest stitch length, or the smallest stitch length, and then the first width of the zigzag, a 1. Now I'm simulating a buttonhole marking. So we have a vertical and horizontal line, and we're going to use that to line that up with the guide below. We're going to line up the horizontal line on that second notch on both sides, and then the vertical line needs to line up with the notch on the bottom as well as the top of the buttonholer. Once everything lines up, then you'll get straight buttonholes every single time. So as long as you make sure all of those lines meet up, all of your buttonholes will be in the same position. I like to do 2 passes to make sure I have a nice strong buttonhole. Make sure that you have interfacing between the 2 pieces. And now I'm going to show you how to make that space wider by going over to the space selector. I'm putting it on a 3, and then we're going to do the process all over again. I am going to demonstrate one of each template so that way you guys have an idea of the types of buttonholes this can make, as well as the different space selections, like the difference it makes when you adjust that. So here we are moving on to an eyelet, and I use these mainly for belt buckles. I like sewn eyelets as opposed to the metal ones. And also you can use these for like a drawstring opening, whatever your project calls for. I'm sure you could even use these decoratively if you needed to. I don't have any markings here for this example. You do mark your eyelets the exact same way you would for any other buttonhole. That way you can make sure that all of your eyelets are in a perfect row, especially if you're making something like a belt. Here I am showing you the eyelet on the largest space, which is a 4, and then I'm going to do one on the smallest space, which is what I usually use for my belts. And here we have the buttonholes that I've made so far. Starting from the left, we have a size 4 space and a size 3 space, and then the eyelets, we have a 4 up top, and then we have the smallest one on the bottom. Now for our final template, the bound buttonhole. So we're going to undo that lock screw, and it's automatically going to go to the 2 setting, and then we're going to lock it back up, and then we're going to go over to the space selector and move it all the way to a 4. Replace the template with the bound buttonhole template, close the little door, and then you're going to want to change the settings on your sewing machine from a zigzag to a straight stitch, and you want to use the tightest stitch for this. Starting with fabric prep, you're going to start your main fabric the exact same way you did the other ones, but this time you're going to use a patch, and you're going to draw that T line, find the center point, line that up with your shirt, blouse, whatever it is that you're making, and then make sure the lines on your patch line perfectly with the lines on your main fabric, and then pin it in place. A quick tip for bound buttonholes, you want to do all of your bound buttonholes at the exact same time to make sure everything lines up perfectly. So if this were a real blouse, all of it would be lined up right now. You would do all the prep at the exact same time and do all of the steps at the exact same time. So now you're just going to line it up like you did all of the others, making sure that that line lines up on the second horizontal line and that the vertical line lines up with the top and the bottom of the buttonholer, and then you're going to go around 2 times for a nice secure buttonhole. Now you're going to want to draw the lines that you're going to use to cut on. Be very careful with this because a bound buttonhole is essentially a hole in your fabric. You're going to cut this out and then you're just going to have a giant hole. So cut along the center line, and then you're going to do the 2 little branches on the triangle. Once the hole is cut, you're going to want to move the patch to the wrong side of the fabric and press everything flat. Make sure when you cut on those diagonals that you get as close to the stitching as possible without cutting through the stitching, so that way you don't have any kind of wrinkles on those corners because they will set in and you don't want that. Then you're going to want to fold your welts down, and then I go in with a needle and thread and baste that hole closed because you want this to stay shut until you set it in permanently with stitches on your sewing machine. And remember that if this were a blouse, you would be doing all of these at once. So after stitching this one closed or basting this one closed, you would baste all of the others closed. Now to set it in, you're going to sew those little tabs down with a straight stitch on your sewing machine, and you're going to go around this 4 times. So you have that long side and 2 of those short little triangular sides, and you want to get as close to that stitching as possible. And I show you that process here. Once the demo is done, I'm going to show you how I finish all of my buttonholes. So for the worked buttonholes, I use some fray check on the front and the back of the buttonhole, and then I let that dry. I use an awl for my eyelets, and I poke that through. An awl just pushes the fibers to the side as opposed to cutting it, which would cause it fraying. Now to cut the worked buttonholes, make sure that your fray check has dried, and then you use a pin on the end of your buttonhole, and then you use a seam ripper to cut through it without cutting straight through the buttonhole and tearing it completely open. And then you just unpick the basting stitches, and then you have a bound buttonhole. And that is how I make my eyelets and buttonholes using my Singer Professional Buttonholer. That is it for the demo. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. I know this has been a long time coming, making a full-length video on this buttonholer alone, but it's finally here, so I hope you find this extremely helpful. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with someone you think might be interested. When it comes to the buttonholer, as someone who makes exclusively vintage patterns or true vintage patterns, I do prefer the look of the buttonholer's buttons, whether it be the Singer Professional Buttonholer or the ones that come with the older machines, because they look like how the buttonholes would have looked back then, as opposed to a computerized machine, which is like extremely perfect and kind of like a satin stitch. In my examples, I did not have any interfacing between the layers, so usually the buttonholes and eyelets are a little bit more uniformed and put together, as you've seen in previous videos where I'm making an actual garment. So it's going to be up to you what you decide and your preference for buttonholers. And because I make my own clothes, this is what I prefer for my own clothing, and you will have to decide for yours. So once again, I hope you find this extremely helpful. If you like this content and you would like to support me any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-fi, or you can become a bobbin over on Patreon for exclusive content. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.